Hey Anna, thanks for doing this. First question for you. When it came to the press release about the decision to cut part of the track and field program, just kind of curious for maybe what the lack of explanation was, and then why the silence on such a big decision for the last few weeks.
Sure. Thanks for joining today and happy to have the opportunity to speak with everyone. I think as far as the timeline and the days since the decision was announced and we met with the team, our focus has really been on the team and making sure that we've provided all the resources we can to them, both for those continuing on here as students or student athletes, but also those looking to transfer to other institutions. So our focus was really there. And happy to provide any other clarification you felt like was missing from the press release. But I think the gist of what we said is 100% the case, in that we are looking at really focusing on the distance portion of our program and centralizing our resources into a place that's a little more focused as opposed to being as broad-based as it was this past year.
Next question, Greg Woods. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, just as a follow up to that, like what went into that decision, and I guess it's like a part two to that. Were you guys fully funding the scholarships for the roster that year or last year?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, Greg. I think what I would say is in the past, all of our sports were given up to the full amount that the NCAA allowed for scholarships. Obviously, we're preparing for an entirely different shift relative to scholarship limits going away and roster limits going into place. And so this past year, after we did a lot of budget adjusting going into this year, we really continued to try to do as much business as usual for our sports as we could. And what we found is that it just was not sustainable to provide the high level experience that really we expect to provide to our student athletes here at Washington State. And so I think as we looked at that, the ability to, adapt to the changes in college athletics and really support our track and cross country program as best possible, we felt like this change was necessary. So effectively, we were focusing, our focus was much more narrow relative to the student athletes and the functions that we were participating in, if that makes sense.
Next question, Sam Taylor, Lewiston Tribune. Go ahead, Sam.
Yes. And is there a long term, is there a path or a desire for you guys to restore the track and field program, maybe 10 years down the line? And obviously this wasn't a decision I assume that was made, joyfully, but just what for a lot of these, obviously it doesn't help the current team, but is there a path to the track and field program being back to what it was?
I think maybe I might tackle your question in multiple pieces if that's okay. I mean, to your point, no, not a joyful decision. I think these types of decisions that eliminate opportunities, whether it be for staff or coaches or student athletes, I mean, that's certainly not why I got into college athletics or any of us. We're about providing opportunity and providing, not only an educational pathway, but an athletic pathway for people coming to Washington State. And so, at this point in time, we remain six programs: cross country, indoor track and field on both the men's and women's side. Now we are choosing to focus on which events we're going to participate in. I might mention similar to swimming and diving. We participate in swimming, not diving, because we feel like we can be much more focused and provide a higher level experience. And so, I think as we look and adapt, as college athletics continues to change, I think we're always looking to see how we can provide the best possible experience to the largest number of student athletes. But right now, this is where we're at with our cross country and track program.
Next question, Barry Bolton, Cougs fan. Go ahead, Barry.
And what are the total dollar savings realized by the cuts in track and field?
Yeah, I think the decision was made not for financial reasons as much as they were for competitive success and ability to really provide a high level experience. And so at the end of the day, many resources will still be put into the cross country and track program. It does necessitate the elimination of 3 full-time coaching positions. So that is an area that, resources could be reallocated either into the program or other places in our athletic department. But it really was much more about positioning our resources as it was a true financial cut. I think if you listen to things, we've talked about as an athletic department, but also Washington State as a university, it's extremely important going forward that we really look at what we can be successful at and really prioritize resources for that. So that's probably not a question I can answer real succinctly, because at the end of the day, it's really about elevating our ability to be successful versus saving money.
Next question, John Blanchette. Go ahead, John. John?
Sorry. And um, so there wasn't any dollar figure looked at when you were, in terms of future budget, when you looked at scaling back this sport?
No, we weren't looking to save a certain amount of money, if that's what you're asking, or
Well, I guess I'm more asking what will be saved? How much will be saved? You can estimate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, partly it'll depend on how many student athletes stay here, to be honest, on their scholarship. Because as we made the commitment to honor anybody on scholarship if they chose to stay at Washington State as a student, we will honor that through their undergraduate completion of their degree. And so a lot of it will be a moving target. The 3 coaching salaries, as I mentioned, are in about the $300,000 range. We're going to provide the resources that cross country and track need to be successful with the pared down roster. This past year we were, trying to do the best we could with sending our student athletes to a variety of different meets, scholarshiping as best we could, but again, spread out amongst a lot of people. And so our focus is going to be much more narrow and strategic. And so if there are resources that end up being freed up, again, this is about an entire athletic department budget, not just this 1 or 6 sport programs, if you will. And so, no, this was not about a financial cut. This was about the ability to be successful going forward, and quite frankly, not being able to continue to be all things, to as many student athletes as we had in our department.
Can you clarify possibly in the future, once things settle down, at what level will these sports be scholarshiped? How many will you have for men and women in track?
Yeah, they'll be given a benefits pool as they were, and in many cases, the benefits pool will remain reasonably similar on the men's side. And then if it decreases at all on the women's side, because we had more participants, quite frankly, that will be put back into our other women's sport programs. And so it's hard to know with the benefits pool how many end up being scholarships. So what we've done, and I apologize, John, I can't remember if you and I have talked about this before, but we've given a benefits pool to each one of our head coaches, and whether they choose to use those in outright scholarships or Alston or, institutional NIL/revenue sharing, that's really up to them. So our director, Wayne Phipps, will have to look at his benefits pool and then decide, we certainly could circle back if it's of interest once the dust settles on who we know is staying and how the scholarship, or benefits pool ends up getting allocated. But that's a hard question for me to answer right now, unfortunately.
Next question, Sydney Berger. Go ahead, Sydney.
Hi, Anne. I am just curious. I know with the ever-evolving college landscape, all these decisions are pretty tough. But just trying to stay competitive in the sports that Washington State is continuing to keep. Is there any, maybe alluding to this could happen to another program or another half of program anytime just in the near future, especially moving into the new Pac-12?
I would say, Sydney, at this point, there are no plans to make any changes like this in the immediate future to any programs. We needed to look at a decreased number of student athletes to provide the highest level of experience for everybody in the department. And quite frankly, as we looked at it, this was an area we felt like where we could continue to sponsor opportunities in all 6 of the programs, albeit with a fewer number of events, obviously. But no, we don't at this point in time anticipate any additional, kind of reallocations, if you will, such as this.
Next question, Jamie Vinnick. Go ahead, Jamie.
And just to kind of follow up on on my first question about kind of the delay in getting further messaging out, is there a concern that kind of the bunker mentality of sorts over the last 3.5 weeks after such a major announcement has undermined any sort of has undermined Wazoo in any way?
No, I mean, I understand, the perception of our or my response may be in the eye of the beholder, but in my mind, actually, it's been just the opposite. I feel like we have been out front with our student athletes. We've been out front with, helping the Pac-12 and the university in Washington, D.C. this last week relative to the future of college athletics. So I think although I understand where the media may seem that we weren't talking to them, we were very much out front and involved with all the areas that we felt were more time sensitive, and quite frankly felt that the media discussion could be put off until obviously here today.
Next question, Greg Woods. Go ahead, Greg.
To kind of change gears a little bit, I kind of wanted to touch on the allocation of institutional NIL for football and basketball. I know you said previously for football it was going to be around 4.5 million. It sounded like part of that also included scholarships and some of those stipend kinds of funds. So I was wondering, like, one, like what that number might be for football, and then also for the basketball programs.
Sure. I mean, the benefits pool is in kind of a separate category, if you will, than institutional NIL. And, obviously that's a very exciting changing time. We started issuing institutional NIL agreements this week, once we were allowed to after the 1st of July. And those types of agreements or dollar amounts will be separate from the benefits pools in some cases. And just for competitive reasons that we're not really disclosing that or discussing it, as you're probably hearing fairly consistently amongst a lot of Division I programs. But you are correct in that 4.5 million was the benefits pool that football had to work with for scholarships for Alston if they chose to do, anything revenue sharing or within that. But true institutional NIL agreements that we're executing, those will be separate and not something that will be discussed relative to a dollar amount.
Next question, Sam Taylor with the Trib. Go ahead, Sam.
And I'm wondering if you could take us kind of as much as you can inside that process of signing those institutional NIL deals. Obviously those are mostly with football and men's basketball participants, but I guess what goes into a coaching staff, deciding how to allocate those resources? Is every student athlete receiving a piece of that pie, or is there only like 20 on the football team? I guess, can you give us some of the specifics of what that process is like and what that process is like as they're going through it this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's been something that's been a long time in the making as we were working through the House settlement and implementation and how we would be opting in as an institution. I would say it's required a tremendous amount of partnership, both within the athletics department and with campus, working through a lot of different procedures, whether it be through legal, through purchasing, through business affairs, and everything that goes into this to do it, the right way. So it really has been a process of partnership that we're extremely grateful for. And then as far as the actual, agreements themselves, it's very similar to as a coach would sit down and talk with, a student athlete about their scholarship the next year, or if that were changing. It's a little unique because a lot of our traditional headcount sports are now effectively equivalencies. So, football, for example, can structure things a little differently. But I think our coaches are really approaching it as an individualized approach, and where a student is at, both in years of school or time at Washington State. It might be by position, it might be by sport. We're still navigating through a lot of the pieces relative to international student athletes and where that all lands. So I would say it's been a very our coaches have approached it as you would hopefully expect. I think just very, very open, very communicative with the student athletes, and really looking at each situation individually. We're really not looking at a blanket approach because we feel like it really is, individualized. And a lot of our coaches are really leaning into, kind of the retention piece of these opportunities. And so it's been, although very new, to all of us, I think it's been a process that's allowed for a lot of great partnership and a lot of good conversation and really culture building within each of our teams.
Next question, Barry Bolton with Coug Fan. Go ahead, Barry.
LSU, to help come up with a 20.5 million to pay their athletes in revenue sharing, is planning to sell advertising on all of its teams' jerseys. Is Washington State going to do the same?
We haven't had any specific discussions or decisions on that right now. But I think that, not only Washington State, but all athletic departments, but also the Pac-12 have to be open to any possible opportunities to generate new revenue. I think as you look at it, obviously we have a subset of revenue that, and sources of funding that we need to work within. And so I think to look at creative new ways that make sense. I don't think you should leave any stone unturned. Now, to say, we would or we wouldn't do that, I don't know. But I think we have to consider it. I think we have to consider everything, or we do ourselves a disservice.
Next question, Jamie Vinnick.
And excuse me. When you look at you think in the House wake or in the wake of the House financial obligations that the NCAA will lower its threshold for the number of sports?
I don't know. One of the things, we were talking about last week is really, creating a national standard for college athletics. And I think a lot of that has to do with, really being a voice for the sports that aren't football or basketball. I think that there is a lot of concern about the future of the Olympic sports in this country, and I think if you look at it, I think it's something like 75% of athletes are in sports other than football and basketball. So I think I don't know. I think that they, like us, will look at every possible change in legislation, but I would hope that maybe some guardrails would also go into place, relative to preserving those opportunities for student athletes.
Next question, Greg Wood. Go ahead, Greg.
To kind of follow up on my last question, I kind of framed that not the way I was intending.
Okay.
You mentioned the 4.5 million as being the pool for football. What would that pool look like for basketball?
Oh boy, I don't have that off the top of my head, to be honest. We could certainly get that to you though, or get
Okay.
it to the group if others are interested.
Okay.
I just don't know off the top of my head. Sorry about that. Each sport, and I'm sorry, so I give you just a little bit of additional context. So we looked at 5-year averages relative to what we had spent in scholarships in the past, and then looking at, changes in costs or, enhancements going forward to those pools. And so, each sport was given a particular pool based on that. And then we certainly have done some, adjustments as, they may have had more in-state versus out-of-state, and that's shifting or vice versa. And so it's been a pretty fluid process, quite frankly, which is one of the reasons they're not all kind of on the top of my head. But we can certainly get that to you.
Next question from Sam Taylor. Go ahead, Sam.
I'm curious, what role the Cougar Collective continues to play in this new revenue sharing space of college athletics, obviously with them still being able to kind of go about perhaps maybe not business as usual is the right term, but continue to do what they've been doing. We saw the bus service they announced a couple of weeks ago and several other projects. What has your interaction level been with the collective, and what do you see as what the role that they can play in the near future for WSU?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about that. The Cougar Collective, they've been amazing partners, and they continue to be amazing partners. I think that, as we've been able to work more closely with them over the past year plus, we'll say, I think we've continued to brainstorm, both all of us, the Cougar Collective and folks here at Washington State, on ways, we can lean into kind of our unique abilities and the things that we can each do. And so they've continued to play an important part, not only with, as you mentioned, various services or products or, a lot of different things that they're able to do or provide in a way that's different than we are. And I think that the partnership's been really great. We interact with them on a regular basis. I see them either in not as much meetings, but more at events or different functions. And they're really closely involved with a lot of our staff, though, and our coaches certainly. And they've been tremendous partners and continue to be. And we're excited that they see the future as we do, which is kind of this, amazing new opportunities that we are a little unknown, and we're trying to, kind of adapt and grow together. And so they've been terrific and continue to be really good partners.
Next question comes from Barry Bolton. Go ahead, Barry.
And how many track and field athletes have given notice that they're departing? How many scholarships have been freed up at this point?
Oh, I don't know if I could tell you scholarships. We have about 35, I believe, that have gone into the portal. So we anticipate that the roster will be 30 to 35 individuals lower. Now that just because they've gone into the portal doesn't mean they will stay in the portal or go somewhere else. We've made a commitment to those athletes that if they go in the portal and they choose not to transfer somewhere, they can come back and stay at Washington State to have their degree fulfilled with their scholarship. So the number I can give you a better sense of, but the scholarships not yet. I don't know how many would end up coming back that were on scholarship versus those that may transfer that are or aren't. So, but 30 to 35 total people ultimately.
Next question, John Blanchett. Go ahead, John.
And a couple more track questions, if you could.
Of course.
You mentioned that this was done to focus your energies, perhaps marshal better resources into a smaller group of people. Was the program's lack of team success at the conference level in the last decade or more a factor into this decision?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay, how about and with outdoor track and field being one of the championship sports in the new restored Pac-12, with a smaller group to compete with, are you comfortable not being reasonably competitive for championship?
Yeah, I mean, I think the really amazing thing about cross country and track, as you know, I mean, there are opportunities to be successful in a wide variety of ways. Whether we wouldn't be measuring things by championships as a team necessarily, as much as we would the opportunity to really be successful and continue, competing as long as possible through postseason. Clearly looking at championships potentially in cross country, but really looking at individual participation and success, and then the ability to be successful in at a national level as much as individuals. I think that we certainly have seen individuals that have had great success nationally, but I think it just, as we looked at the landscape going forward, it just felt like we were spreading ourselves just too thin there to have high level success in at least some areas.
Sydney Berger. Go ahead, Sydney.
Okay, I kind of have a two-part question, but as far as, getting Texas State into the conference as that eighth football member, do you know if expansion is kind of still the urgent focus for the conference? And my second part is there anything that you know of that the Pac-12 is trying to do, I guess, to solidify a Power 5 status in the eyes of the rest of the country and the Power 4 conferences?
Sure. I think that both the membership and the media partnerships have kind of been running on parallel tracks in a lot of cases. The membership piece, an important part, certainly the media piece, an important part. And I think the Pac-12 has done a good job of really looking at a, kind of phased approach on that. And I think that, they continue to evaluate, as we will collectively as a conference, what any future membership, potential looks like, but also really finalizing the remaining pieces and getting those announced for the media partnership. So, I think clearly getting the eighth full-time member that played football, and then Gonzaga as a ninth member, I think that, or 9 total members overall. I just think it's really exciting relative to the future of the Pac-12. And, really, it has become evident. I know it may be cliche to talk about it in this setting, but it really is true that these are institutions that are looking to lean into the future of college athletics and how do you adapt and how do you be the best you can be, but also really looking at all of the different areas that we can support our student athletes and wanting to invest in that way. And so I think the membership and the media will continue to be areas that the Pac-12 evaluates, but no immediate plans that I'm aware of on the membership piece. I think it was important to get to the 8 full-time football schools, and then we'll kind of see where things go from there. As far as your second part of your question, it's a really interesting dynamic. The Autonomy 5 or the Power 5 status is such a kind of a interesting thing with the NCAA, and that there's a lot of it was basically a vote that took the Pac-12 out of that legislative part of the structure of the NCAA, but there really is no mechanism as to how even the current Power Four conferences or institutions within those conferences, there's no benchmark. There's no, nothing to reach that you all of a sudden then are considered or a process in place. So I think that's certainly something we and the Pac-12 commissioner and the Pac-12 have been, contemplating, and we certainly did last week in Washington, is, what does that look like? How do you become, a power conference, so to speak, whether it's 4, 5, 3, 6, whatever it is, it's kind of a, it's not very well defined, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so I think that's something that we really want to lean into and look at. And what does that even mean going forward? Is it important? Is it still going to continue to be a benchmark? But there's no doubt. I mean, when you look at the strength both of competitive success and the institutions, that the Pac-12 is in the top 5 for conferences, and so we're actively exploring what that means and how that ever even is measured, to gain or to lose going forward.
Next question, Sam Taylor. Go ahead, Sam.
And speaking with some of the sprinters at WSU have since entered the transfer portal, they felt that although sprint and hurdles were continued to be supported by the school, that because their specific event coaches had been dismissed and no longer employed with the school, that they didn't really see a future for them at WSU. What is the sprint and hurdles experience going to look like going forward at WSU? How many scholarships? How any plans to hire event specific coaches, and then what are the range and I guess which meets are they going to be able to participate in?
Sure. So one of the reasons sprints and hurdles were left open relative to, kind of a phasing or a phased approach, so to speak, is that, our head coach, Wayne Phipps, does have the ability to coach sprints and hurdles and certainly has a background doing that, and could. Now, I 100% understand, what you're sharing and how the athletes feel relative to having a dedicated event-specific coach for sprints and hurdles. So there are no plans to add any additional staff. And quite frankly, it's an opportunity if sprinters and hurdlers, excuse me, would choose to stay, or that we would sponsor going forward. But I think ultimately, there likely will be very few that continue on. And so it will likely be primarily distance, mid-distance, focused. And I don't know at this point if any sprinters or hurdlers will ultimately decide to stay. As far as scholarships, it would be within that pool. So if they're currently on scholarship, that scholarship certainly would be honored, and they would have the ability to participate. If they choose to transfer, then that money is effectively freed up in the pool to be allocated elsewhere within track.
Next question, Greg Woods. Go ahead, Greg.
Hey, and back in, I think it was maybe April, you kind of hinted to us that there was like some sort of like lodging development you guys were working on for home football weekends. Just wondering if there's any update on that and kind of what that might look like.
Not yet. I mean, I think we're close to rolling out a lot of that and a lot of other amenity updates, but not quite there yet.
My other part to this, I guess it's kind of related, is that there's this one game on the football schedule that doesn't have a start time, which is the James Madison game. I know the ball's probably in their court because the game is at their place. I'm just wondering if there's any ETA on getting that start time finalized.
I don't believe so yet.
Next question, Barry Bolton. Go ahead, Barry. Barry?
And if I'm hearing you correctly, you said the track and field cuts were strictly for competitive reasons, not for financial ones. So the question begs, why can't WSU going forward compete in track and field, and particularly given WSU's storied history in the sport?
Yeah, Barry, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear enough on that. Financial reductions to the department, that doesn't mean that the specific support to the track and cross-country program won't change. So if I wasn't clear on that, I apologize. So I look at, I guess it's two parts. You have the cross-country and track program, obviously, and all of the resources and budget that go towards them, but then our department as a whole. So it was really a reallocation to make the cross-country track program more competitive, but overall to reallocate our resources into, you know, the best possibility to be successful going forward. So it's not that cross-country and track will be the exact same budgets that they had been, but it wasn't about a budget cut as a department. And I apologize if I wasn't clear enough on that. Sorry.
Next question, Jamie Vinnick. Go ahead, Jamie.
And what's the status of the apparel contract expiring? And is the plan to re-up with Nike?
I stay tuned on that. I think there'll be official news shortly.
As a reminder, if you have questions, we have time for a few more. Please raise your hand and we'll get to you. Looks like everyone's good. Sam Taylor, go ahead. Final one.
Obviously the news was announced this week that WSU men's basketball is going to Europe. Obviously an exciting opportunity for them. But I'm wondering, curious about the financials of that kind of trip, and I guess is this maybe is this something that programs can anticipate doing? You know, on that 4-year or 6-year rotation, and I guess what are the financials of this WSU men's basketball trip going to Europe?
Yeah, I mean, this is something we have done. Volleyball and women's basketball went to, I believe, Croatia and Greece a few years back. Men's basketball certainly has gone on other trips like this. It is privately funded, so it is funded through fundraised dollars. And again, I think it's a good example of, you know, just looking at ways that, you know, provide a great student athlete experience to help with recruiting, to help have additional opportunities to compete and practice within the, you know, confines of the NCAA rules and regulations. I'd have to get you what the final amount was on that. But yeah, it's been in the works for quite some time, although recently announced, but yeah, 100% fundraised dollars on that.